Every day for about a year, turkeys observe the farmer bringing them food and water, cleaning their quarters, and generally looking after them. They compile an impressive data set on farmer behavior. A model is built, with statistical significance. The day before Thanksgiving, at the height of their confidence, they experience what would be described, were they here to describe it, as a 6 sigma event. Kyle's second law of nutritional science. Belief in a dietary paradigm precedes, rather than follows, learning the particulars about that diet or even basic nutritional science. Faith before knowledge. There is a tendency towards confidence in grander, more comprehensive questions than in smaller, more discrete ones, in contradiction to the fundamentally additive nature of knowledge acquisition. People will admit that they don't know what a vitamin or mineral does, while simultaneously believing that they have found the ideal human diet. This could work if one is using a nutritional model that is robustly time-tested, but not so much if there aren't many generations of trial and error behind it. Clinically, effects of experimental diets can be assessed without accounting for each little micronutrient, but the results are only useful if the effects of the given variables in the time frame of the study are the same as the real-world conditions being modeled, which are presumably free-living, open-ended human lives. Empiricism, embodied in the clinical trial, considered the gold standard of nutritional science, fails in the face of unknown unknowns, things that cannot be modeled ahead of time without knowledge of their existence or how they work, phenomena lacking a prior base referent. The causes and results of these biases will be explored in this essay. A gentleman inquires of another whilst walking in the street. "Excuse me, sir. Might I ask of you a few questions? Thank you. Firstly, will you feel good or ill in 3 weeks' time? How is the weather right now in Bolivia? And lastly, what is the composition alloy that forms the wristwatch you are at present wearing?" The look of shock and indignation on the face of the man thus inquired was indescribable. "Why, whatever do you mean, whatever could you mean, sir, by asking such farcical questions? I think you are quite mad to ask a man questions he must needs be unable to answer." "Quite right. How silly of me. Let me think. How's about this? When and how was the world created, and by whom? What is the meaning of life on earth? How will it all end?" The stranger's look softened. "Ah, yes, a fine fellow after all, a reasonable gentleman. Of these, yes, of questions such as these, a man may be suited to speak." The tendency to rest on blind empiricism springs forth from the godhead of our innate pattern recognition. In the natural world, a deep understanding of phenomena is often unnecessary, sometimes even counterproductive, to beneficial action. Running away from predators doesn't require understanding of the situation, and accidentally running away from something that seemed like a dangerous predator but wasn't is less bad than not running away from something that was but didn't seem to be. These sorts of asymmetries drive behavioral evolution. Our heuristic instincts, however, are unsuited to phenomena outside of the natural events they evolved under, to complex phenomena of unknown causality or non-Gaussian distribution. Novel total diet manipulations using foods from around the world, combined with synthetic nutritional supplementation, could fall under this category. You will likely have more success guessing the average seasonal temperature of a place than the temperature on any specific day, the average height of a country rather than the height of an individual, the mean response to a drug rather than that of one subject. Why is that? First, we know a lot of these things already. Normal adults walk around with representative data sets on various phenomena, something one might call education or, more simply, experience. If anything occurs too far outside of the norm, it becomes a point of conversation. How about this weather? Look at the size of that guy. Did you see the Mets won last night? People unconsciously build frameworks from their observations over time. It's hot this time of year. Men are about yay tall. The Mets lose, and so on. Second, we either know or assume that phenomenological traits are normally distributed and reproducible. You see the salaries of a dozen employees at a company, the size of a few dogs, the breath-holding times of kids playing at the pool, and you get a feel for the range of those things. It doesn't occur to you for a second that these traits won't cluster around a central value or, even more foreign of a concept, that the values you have observed are unrelated to future values of similar phenomena, either because they are truly random or, more likely, driven by a veiled second or third causality as opposed to the one you imagine. For example, the children you are watching may be engaged in a challenge to see who can hold their breath underwater for exactly 30 seconds before emerging. Without knowing this veiled causality, you may simply assume that most children can't hold their breath longer than about 30 seconds. What's more, you will be confident that you have good evidential backing for this conclusion, courtesy of your unbiased empiricism. As a sheepdog herds sheep, the movement of individuals is chaotic compared to that of the group. At any given snapshot in time, a sheep may be moving in a direction perpendicular to, or even opposite, the herd. However, if over the course of 10 minutes the herd of sheep moved from the field to the barn, then the average movement of any sheep was exactly that, from the field to the barn. A representative center mass of sheepness moved in a direct line, inexorably, towards the barn, surrounded by a chaotic orbit of random individual movement. If you understood that the purpose of the sheepdog was to herd sheep to the barn, you wouldn't be thrown off by the single observation of one sheep running in the opposite direction. Experience seeing sheepdogs herding sheep before would immediately inform your perspective that that's just a sheep going the wrong way, and the dog will be along shortly to chase it back towards the correct direction. Imagine being completely ignorant of the purpose of sheepdogs and being able to observe only one sheep of the herd. You see it running away from the barn while the dog is running towards it. You might assume the purpose of the sheepdog is to chase sheep away from the barn, with supporting evidence. This is the power of prior reference and experience with phenomena, and we take it for granted. We also tend to overrate our contextual understanding of novel phenomena when we may, in fact, have none. Everyone knows that the result of a coin toss is 50-50. If a coin lands heads 5 times in a row, it's still just as likely to land on heads or tails on the 6th toss. How do we know this? Have we performed billions of coin tosses, observed crossover longitudinal studies to get the best empirical data on coin tossing? Of course not. We know that a coin toss is a 50-50 endeavor because we know how tossed coins work, their mechanism of action. We know that a fair coin, weighted equally on each face, flipped upwards, will be equally likely to land on either of its sides. If you switch from a nickel to a quarter, you don't need to run a randomized double-blind study to make sure that both coins work the same way. Unless there is something very much wrong with a coin, 50-50 results can be assumed without the need for preliminary trials. Furthermore, if you know for a fact that a coin is unfair, one face is much heavier than the other, for example, no number of equal results will convince you that the toss is 50-50. Extensive trials applying the Bernoulli equation with fair coin results will not convince you if you know a coin is shaped to be unfair of its fairness. Loaded dice or unfair coins can, by chance, display a random result for many trials. Theoretically, an unfair coin could land 50-50 for 1,000,000 tosses. This would not make it a fair coin, though, admittedly, this would be a Six Sigma event. If the weighting of the coin is such that it's 70-30 likely to land on one face, that material reality can't be disproven by any number of chance trials, just like a coin can't be proven truly fair by any number of trials less than infinite. Understanding the mechanism that undergirds a phenomenon grants access to infinite simulated observations, a metaphysical quasi-view of a thing's replicative behavior. This is a reiteration of the deductive versus inductive reasoning dialectic, with toss trials playing the role of deduction and material information that of induction. For deduction to reach a conclusion, to know the number of trials needed to achieve confidence, a prior referent is needed. This referent is a statistical law derived from calculations of similar random versus non-random behavior. Additionally, the very assumption of reproducibility is also required. The base ontological referent of deduction, that we inhabit a plane of existence characterized by reproducible phenomena, is the universe itself. The universe, qua deduction, exists in an infinitely recursive relationship with the deductions it instructs, its instantiation as a realm of reproducible phenomena being perpetually informed by the deductions occurring within it. Will the universe always keep up its end of the bargain? Will the farmer forever tend the turkeys? Hell if I know. Bringing it back to nutrition, imagine our two gentlemen again. Sir, will your blood potassium be higher or lower than now in 3 years and 2 months? What biomolecules are in the food you're eating right now? Versus, how much and what things ought one to eat? Clinical studies are the gold standard of nutritional science because the individual differences of the subjects add realistic noise and infuse the effects of interventions with the texture of reality. Other kinds of research, biochemistry or animal science, for example, try to understand physiological phenomena on a mechanistic level. Clinical research can eschew this understanding because it controls for confounding factors. Wait, does that sound right to you? How does one know what to control for when one explicitly does not know or understand the phenomenologically relevant causal factors? From the years 1957 to 1962, the drug thalidomide was prescribed to pregnant women suffering from morning sickness. Depending on what stage of pregnancy they were in, this caused birth defects either to the brain, eyes, ears and face, arms, or legs of the developing fetus. More than 10,000 children were born with defects and deformities. It was later discovered that due to its chiral center at carbon 3 of the 2,6-piperidine 2,6-dione ring, thalidomide exists as two enantiomers, one that treats morning sickness and one that is teratogenic. In what way could a clinical study, as opposed to organic chemistry, ever hope to learn something like this? If, for example, a study put hundreds, thousands, even millions of pregnant women on the drug, and by chance the study just happened to use women more than 42 days post-conception, this issue might not even be observed. The drug would then be prescribed to pregnant women in general because, without a mechanistic understanding of how one enantiomer is teratogenic for fetuses of less than 42 days gestation, why wouldn't it be? The issue of chirality in thalidomide, as well as hundreds of other compounds, would be a known unknown in a world where chirality is understood. In a world where it is not understood, it would be an unknown unknown. The tools for discovering why a drug such as this works in one case, but is ineffective or harmful in another, do not exist in the clinical toolbox. Turkey problems are caused by missing tools, and one can discover a turkey problem two ways: the hard way, or by employing the correct tool for the question. How can we identify potential turkey problems? That's the thing. You can't. Through the 18th century, malaria was thought to be contracted through the nighttime inhalation of noxious swamp gases. This belief arose from the fact that the malarial parasites responsible were transmitted by mosquitoes, which are heavily present in swampy environments and are more active at night, entering people's homes through open windows and feeding on them while they sleep. A clinical trial, so to speak, of keeping windows closed at night to prevent poisonous swamp gas inhalation would strongly support the swamp gas hypothesis. It could be performed blind, with subjects not being told if their windows were being left open or not, and randomized, and even crossed over if you wanted to. It would yield the same positive results, while failing utterly to capture the cause of malaria. Only if one had access to the mechanistic understanding of insect-borne disease, blood parasites, and the biology and ecology of the mosquito would one be able to see past the obvious success of the swamp gas theory and its application in shuttered bedroom windows. If one anachronistically had access to gas masks capable of filtering poisonous swamp gas, which doesn't even exist, then one could demonstrate that it's not the swamp gas, but some other factor coming through the open windows at night that is causing malaria. But why, if one has no conceptual reason to doubt the swamp gas hypothesis, would one even conduct such an experiment? The clinical trial answered the question. Malaria is caused by inhalation of dangerous swamp gases at night, and the solution is closing bedroom windows to prevent entrance of the gas. There would probably be quite a bit of resistance by the medical community of the time to persons claiming to have contracted malaria, perhaps from daytime mosquito contact, whilst dutifully shuttering their windows at night. Mosquito-borne microbial blood parasites were an unknown unknown. Let us again return our focus to nutritional science. Of all the biomedical fields, do you think nutrition is at the level of maturity where it ought to discard its concern with unknown unknowns? It was not that long ago that vegans were running headlong into B12 deficiency due to an incomplete understanding of its different forms. In this case, the existence of B12, or cobalamin, was a known, but the issue of its different forms, their bioactivity statuses, that they compete for absorption and enzyme occupancy, were unknowns. Without knowledge of these things, the reason algal or plant B12 did not alleviate symptoms of deficiency could have never been understood. Further complicating the matter is the chronic nature of B12 deficiency, which can take over a decade to manifest. A serious clinical trial of a vegetarian versus meat-eating diet could never last 10 years. Most high-quality randomized studies of total nutritional manipulation don't even last half of 1 year. Many people were told for a long time that algae in plants would prevent what is a very serious vitamin deficiency, which can cause permanent brain and heart damage. So-called vegan B12 was a turkey problem. In nutritional science, many such cases.